Hey everybody, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
Legacy Evan, kind of.
Kind
Legacy
of, sort of.
advocate. Legacy advocate. I'm gonna
Oh,
go with that.
oh, champion,
Yes.
legacy champion.
That makes me sound
Love
like
it.
I'm a
So,
unit champion and I'm about to get smashed by impact hits. Oh no, Mike. No.
well, but not for me. Maybe from the community. We'll find out. But that being said, as we alluded to, this entire week has been dedicated to our excitement and hype, and just so pumped for the FAQ updates that GW has been dropping. We talked about in some of our previous videos. They updated the core rules for the game with the FAQ, and it wasn't just here's some improvements, here's some fixes. It really was a shakeup. It really feels like edition 1.5 in so many different ways. Infantry are back, baby, in a really big way. We'll talk about that more in some of the other videos and some of our tell you about our latest RTT and some of the fun results we got there with infantry definitely dominating. But anyway, we talked about that earlier in the week, which is great. We went through all that. We also talked about just the other day the updates to the core factions, right? So we went through the
Yes.
FAQ drops they had there, which was great. But today, we're going to be talking about some updates that we have tackled in our own community with our Old World Legends, our Legacy Errata 2.0 update, Evan.
Yes.
Ooh. So tell us a little bit about that. So what have we been looking at from a high level?
So from a high level, we've seen the following kind of changes to the core game and to individual units. Now, first of all, there was a major infantry rebalance. We've seen that. It did leave out monstrous infantry. And in particular, we've
Mhm.
got one legacy faction, the Ogres, which rely almost entirely on monster infantry, which feels pretty bad because in a lot of ways they're very similar to infantry. They have no swift stride, they're ranks and files of guys. And if they have no buffs whatsoever, if they have no parry, if they have no outnumber, then they're really held behind because their main advantage was in fighting an enemy infantry. And now if they're going to be charging in and trying to fight head to head against infantry that has a better armor save and two ranks of guys swinging back at them, they are just potentially very outmatched and to the point where it could be very unplayable. Now we're not giving all of the infantry changes to Monstrous Infantry, but we're gonna just bring it up that hey, there's some Monstrous Infantry in the legacy list that I think is a little bit left behind. We're gonna be talking about that. And then I think
Yeah.
the second big bullet point from this latest errata, to be honest, guys, it was an errata. They just wanted to rewrite the rules, change it for like this 1.5 edition, and that's fine. Okay, it's really going to improve the health of the game. But they changed magic, and one of the ways they did this is they reduced a lot of the spell values. It was not every spell. It was not even half of all the spells. I mentioned this before. It was 27% of the core rulebook spells were lowered in casting value by one, except for a single
Sure.
spell. A single spell was lowered by two, and the spell that was lowered by two was Deathly Cabal, which most people probably don't even know what that does. Um, so we are going to see some
Yes.
changes for the spell casting and some changes for monster infantry and other units that perhaps were so bad and so just not doing what they're supposed to do that we feel like maybe this can help them out. You saw in the army specific review and errata that we just released yesterday that they did make rebalancing changes. You can't tell me that adding Furious Charge to Whitelands was like a spelling mistake or like they just, oh, we forgot that was supposed to be there. No, they think that it's a balancing update. And I think one of the main reasons why they added things like that to those units is because they're not going to feel right if they don't have certain changes like that.
Yeah, absolutely right. So we're going to go through the list here. Again, keep in mind, our objective is we are not looking at the legacy factions and saying, how do we make this a S tier list? That is not our intention. We do not want to rebalance the whole legacy factions. We want to stay as true and core to their theme, their flavor, their identity, what makes them fun to play, what makes them unique. But we want to certainly raise the floor of them so that the units that are never seeing the tabletop, whether they're just broken or need a little bit of support, that will someone who loves the army and hobbies it up and wants to paint it and wants to put it on the battlefield, they're given that opportunity to at least have fun with that unit. So that really is our approach. In addition to, as Evan said, we needed to address again the meta adjustment, both of the spells and other things, and reflect that and such. As a simple example here, we don't need to
Right.
go into detail, but one of the first ones here is the vortexes. We just updated this in our FAQ. Basically, they did go through all of the other vortexes in the core spells and said, hey, now if you move through a vortex at any time, boom, it triggers the vortex. You get hit with it, and it
Yeah.
went from dangerous terrain to difficult terrain. So basically, hey, if there's any vortex spells in the legacy spells, which there are some, just update it to reflect exactly what they did with every single other vortex. We really don't need to dive into that. That's just, hey, have them match what they did with the rest of the game for
And it's
vortexes.
much easier just to remember that, hey, pretty much every single vortex, if you walk over it, you get the effect. So, for example,
Triggers. Yep.
the effect triggers. So the Black Horror vortex of the Dark Elves is a pretty unique vortex because actually in the original rules, if you walked over it, you did take the damage, but now it's just in
Mhm.
alignment with all of the other vortexes in the game as well, having that same effect. So if you walk over it, you take those like D6 strength tests, for example. That's what that one does.
All right, so that was an easy one. So
Yeah.
vortexes, but let's move down into our list. So
Right.
we've reflected here in our document, and again, this is available on our Discord, and you can find it on our Google Drive, available for everybody to check out and share very freely. It's not just for the people attending our events. We've tagged things that are new in the purpley color, and anything that we updated will be in the blue color. But we got
Yes.
some new entries here, don't we, Evan?
Yes, we have a few entries here, and just to keep in mind, our mission statement and what we're trying to do is we're trying to emulate what Games Workshop was doing to the main factions and carry over
Yes.
that design methodology to the legacy factions that I'm imagining they weren't allowed to write rules changes for. You know,
Not at this time.
I'm
Hopefully in the
sure they would
future.
want to.
All right, we're still firm believers that, and for good reason, we have faith that in the future, a lot, if not all, the legacy factions someday will hopefully become core again. But for the moment, they are very important to us. They're very important to the community,
Absolutely.
and we're going to do what we can to maintain them so that as the game evolves from
Right.
GW, we are happy to support them as well and encourage everyone to bring them to events.
Okay, so let's talk about Skaven. All right, so I had a couple things on here. So first of all, we just talked about the spells real fast. Skaven have, I believe it's 3 signature spells. And if you notice, one of the main things Games Workshop did is they made a lot of the spells that were a 10 plus casting value, they lowered them to 9 plus. And in particular, they changed these higher level casting value spells where if you're a level 4 wizard with a +2 to cast, if you're trying to roll the 10 on those dice, that's not even a 50-50 chance that you'll get it. And so maybe for
Not
a
even.
spell like Miasma Barrage, that might make sense that it won't even necessarily be a 50-50 shot. But I think that for Warp Lightning, that does not make sense. And so I think that's a spell that it makes sense for it to be lowered to a 9 plus.
Yep, absolutely. So again, selectively, it's not all spells are being reduced. We're following the pattern, about one third in that pattern that GW showed us of those 10, 11 plus to cast, lower those by one. So that's what's reflected here.
Right. Second off, I personally, when I was playing 7th edition Skaven, my most favorite thing to do was to just shoot machine guns and vortexes and templates and stuff into my guys while they're in combat and just roll to see which of us died, you or me. I don't know. And so I think that there's a couple war machines, the weapon teams, the Plague Wind Mortar and the Warpfire Thrower, that are pretty bad because their range is so short that you pretty much get one shot with it and then everyone's in combat and you can't shoot anymore. And so people are generally just taking the Rattling Gun because you can just kind of walk that thing around and machine gun people all the time. And so you don't have this template restriction where it can't ever possibly scatter into combat and it's so hard to ever even shoot at anything. So my idea here was, okay, I think that the mortar and the warfire thrower should be able to just target units in combat because if you're going to do that, it's very likely it will either scatter or overshoot into some of your own units, and it'll just have a nice little fun vibe of accidentally I guess it scattered onto my clan rats and they all blew up, or I guess the flame went
Yeah.
into the storm vermin or something. And I think that makes perfect sense for the Skaven that they would do this.
Yeah, it feels very thematic, feels on point. This is
Right.
something we have seen other communities have done different versions of this. And from talking to our community and playtesting at this point, we feel that this would be a great addition to start including as well. But
Yeah.
we have something new in particular to unleash or bring to our events in the community for our Skaven players. Some Rat Ogre love. What do we got
Yeah,
there?
so if you've looked at a lot of the units around, even the Monstrous Infantry units, which are potentially some of the weaker ones nowadays, a lot of the units, especially like elite ones, they have hand weapons that have AP1 on them, like ensorcelled weapons on, Chaos Warriors and, even Storm Vermin have ensorcelled hand weapons for AP1. And Rat Ogres are a pretty unique Monstrous Infantry unit in that they have a hand weapon with Armor Bane 2, and that's it. And then so they have like 4 attacks that they just if they do get Frenzy Charge, which by the way, Frenzy is worse than it used to be, so they already got nerfed there. And if they did get that charge, they would have a whole bunch of attacks at AP 0, and if they're going into infantry now, that infantry can have a parry save, and if it's like a dwarf with heavy armor and shield, they can have a 3+ save against that. And so I don't think it really, I don't think anyone would ever feel good about rolling rat ogre attacks and being like, wow, all of these massive, hulkingly strong dudes walked in there and did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and right now, which is why we
Yeah,
rarely see them on the tabletop. So again, we felt is we want to make sure that where we can, in small amounts, in particular for the legacy factions, give them a little bit of attention. We'd like to
right.
see Rat Ogres definitely feel like they need at least a base AP -1 with their attacks. Armor Bane still existing exactly how the
That's
rest of the
great.
unit
It's
works
fine.
right now. We feel this will this should make fielding Rat Ogres feel meaningfully better with actually not having a massive impact on the balance change. So again, that's our
Right.
goal: is what's the smallest change we can make that people would still feel good
And
about putting them on the
remember,
battlefield.
nobody plays these, and so when you bring them to the table and you say, yeah, they have AP1, people are going to be like, or if you tell them, oh yeah, I have AP0 with these rat ogre attacks, and be like, what? Really? Have you looked at the
Yeah.
model? Like the hell? And I just want to say real
Anyway,
fast about the whole plague wind and warfire thing, right? Shooting into
mm,
combat. Oh no, no one's allowed to do that except all of the draw line attack spells that get to do this, and the warpfire cannon, which gets to do this. You could just say, I'm going to point my warpfire cannon at that big combat with your dragon, and I'm just going to shoot through all my own dudes and hit your dragon too. I think that's fair. That's fine. And you know what? Bretonia, they can use their little burning gaze thing that shoots through combat. And you know what? It doesn't even hurt friendly units when Bretonia does it. So I
yeah,
think it's
orcs also have
perfectly,
one too.
yeah, I think it's perfectly fine for the Plague Wind Mortar to just roll a small 3-inch template and just see where it scatters to. Whatever. Who cares? Right? I
All
care.
right, so that's Skaven. What's after Skaven?
Lizardmen are next. Now,
So
Lizardmen,
before new stuff, we have an
yeah.
update, don't we?
Yeah, so the first one is an update. We did have Cold Blooded just works for stupidity because it seemed like that was the main sticking point that made Cold One Riders just impossible to bring. However, it was brought to our attention, and especially now that Impetuous has changed their leadership test, that hey, wouldn't it be just simpler to say it can just be used for any leadership test? Especially when you have a low leadership army, it's very often a leadership 8 army, and you're just like, can we just not have to think about which types of leadership test it works for or not? So yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. We can just have cold blooded work for any leadership test, but just not remember that break checks are not leadership tests. If you use the whole fall back in good order mechanic with cold blooded, Lizardmen infantry are just completely impossible to break through. They're undead. They will just always give ground. It's crazy. So I
Yeah.
don't think you can use it for break tests. It does not fit the narrative of the game for that to happen, but it should be used for
I,
things like impetuous and things like that.
It's also incredibly powerful. So
Yeah,
again,
it's
this
too
is where
powerful.
we've seen other communities have given them not only for leadership but also break tests as well. We don't necessarily align on that approach. We feel that is too powerful. So that this is a change. It is a buff from our
Yeah.
previous version that we had, but we think break test is going one step too far.
Which, by the way, remember, Sarus got a massive glow up from the core rules. Sarus have
Oh yeah,
heavy armor, they have shields, so if they go in with their parry, they have a 3+ armor save on from the front rank, and the front rank has 2 attacks. And so if you have Sarus 5 wide and 2 deep, right, you have to kill 10 of them before you don't get attacked back. And if
it's
you only
awesome.
kill 5, the front rank get you with 2 attacks, and they're strength 4 AP1 on those attacks. I think that Sarus are now a really good unit, and you know what they're really good against? Is enemy infantry. They can just walk into them and
Yeah.
say, "Oh yeah, watch this," and then just wallop the absolute crap out of them.
They are one of the best infantry in the game with
Yeah,
these updates. I
and
think
in
we're going to see a lot of lizardmen hitting the
yeah,
tables again, and I'm so happy. I think we're going to see Saurus on the table again, which we haven't seen in a long time.
yeah, and you know what? Sarus are they're almost as strong as an ogre, and they're half the price. Like I think they're pretty cool.
Um, all right, but we got some new stuff
Yeah.
that we're adding here. What else? What do we got next? We got some
So
casting updates. It looks like.
So the legacy factions have a lot of spells that have 2 casting values, a lower value that has 1 effect and a higher value that has a
Mhm.
secondary effect. And a lot of them for some reason were 8 plus for the lower one and 12 plus for the higher one. Now this is a
Mhm.
bit of a challenge for me personally because I'm trying to emulate what Games Workshop was editing, and Games Workshop was editing the casting values for higher level spells down by 1 a lot of the time, and they were not lowering the casting values for lower level spells. So you did not often see that 8 plus was being lowered to 7 plus. That was pretty rare. And you often did see though that if something was 12 or 11 plus, it was being dropped down. So this is the first case where I thought it would be a good idea to just only lower that higher level casting value down by 1, but leave the lower one where it was. And in the case of Apotheosis, it's kind of fine because the higher level casting value is almost irrelevant. Because what it does, right? It heals a unit D3 plus 1 wounds instead of just D3. However, the units you're targeting can only have like 2 or 3 wounds anyway. So it's like barely does any. It's actually kind of annoying how the spell barely matters. But anyway, this is the first spell of which it matches that pattern. So we'll see that pattern continue. And I'm trying to use a consistent pattern across the different armies.
Okay, and the next two we have, again, we've seen similar versions of this in other communities as well.
Right.
And through, again, our play testing and talking to our local community, there's definitely been a consensus that they'd like to see these included in our errata as well.
Yeah, Salamander is very similar to what I was talking about with the Warpfire Thrower. If it has a breath attack, it's completely, you will never get to use it. You can bring a Salamander all you want. You can play 10 games. You're going to be able to use it maybe once. And it's just really annoying because the range is so short. And so if you replace that and you use the Column of Fire rule, like a Fire Thrower, which is pretty much what it's always done before, it can then kind of shoot just a little bit further away where it just kind of just vomits forward. And
But
that's
it makes
great.
a difference, big difference.
Big difference. And you know what? What Salamanders are great against? Walls of Infantry.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to see those. And then the next one we have, again, a very similar one we've seen in several other communities, the Engine of the Gods upgrade for the Stegodon, where it required you to have two of them, which
Yes.
don't get me even started. Even a 2,000 point game, because of the cost of them, you couldn't even get two of them. To get that,
255 points to get them, and they're
yeah.
in rare, so you cannot fit two of them by just 5 points.
Yep, and in particular with all of the casting reductions that are affecting all the wizards in the
Yes.
game, it feels appropriate, and in particular now to us, that this should work with a single Stegodon with the upgrade. That being said, it will not stack if you happen to be playing more than a 2,000 point game, similar to an RFAQ. The Mortis engine doesn't stack. Similar to the Casket of Souls won't stack. The Engine of the Gods plus will not stack.
Right.
But in particular, for your 2,000 or less points game, you only need one to get that benefit.
Right, and you're going to see that, these casting value bonuses are incredibly important to be able to bring to an army that can be very magic oriented. If you want to have the slam, I kind of think you need the Engine of the Gods to just give him up to like a +3 when he's sending out his spells. I think that's super cool. You could just buy one of them, and you got to then hang out next to it, and guess what? It can be killed, right? It's a large target, so I think it works perfectly good the way it is.
Yeah, keep in mind again, different. There are several different approaches other communities have taken to how the slan works.
Yeah.
This is not new. This is the existing rules we had from before. We believe the correct version, or the version that we were excited about with our community, is that the slan should remain his large target. He can join the Temple Guard. He's not outside skirmishing on his own. We didn't feel that was appropriate. He does have that. He's on a chariot, that firing platform rule. So, in particular, the way we've been playing in our community is the slan is inside the Temple Guard. He does get protection from the Temple Guard with some caveats, and so he's in there with that large target, being able to shoot over things and that heavy chariot firing platform, so he can use his spells 360. So the slan is looking really spicy in particular, especially if you can now bring an Engines of the God to give him +1 to cast.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, we have a little change to a unit that is similar to some of these things we've been talking about with Monstrous Infantry, right? Where Kroxigor just don't feel right. And one of the main reasons for that is that they can just get massacred constantly by either enemy shooting or just in combat. They just don't really seem to like survive. Now, I would really love to see them return to what they kind of used to be able to do, which is they could embed themselves inside a skink unit, where the skinks were in the front, Kroxigor were just behind them, and they could just reach over the top of the skinks and just wallop you, which is, I think that sounds really, really cool. Maybe in the future update, I might be writing something that has some of the units that are missing mysteriously from the old world, but we will be talking about that later. But for now, I think it makes perfect sense that maybe their scaly skin could just be improved just slightly, so that they can kind of stay up to par with, similar Monstrous Infantry units in other books. And you know what? In some ways, make them feel a little bit different, because actually it's pretty hard for Monstrous Infantry to ever really have a decent armor save. You have Dragon Ogres out there rocking the 3+ armor save just all the time. And Monstrous Infantry, I don't know of any of them that can really get a 3+ on foot as a regular unit. So we've got Heavy Armor and Iron Fist Man-Eaters, but they only get a 4+. So this is an interesting play, I think.
Yep, so we're excited to see. Hopefully, we'll see. It's been pretty rare to see Kroxigors on the field about at all. And again, one of the themes for us in particular is it feels like we
Right.
love the infantry buff that GW has done with the FAQ 1.5. We feel there was a missed opportunity with some of the monstrous infantry. And so you'll see a theme as we go through the legacy Errata 2.0. We are looking for what are minor improvements we can do to hopefully make that monstrous infantry feel a little bit more on par, comparable with the infantry buffs that have occurred in the game. Plus, we also, besides Minotaurs, haven't really seen a ton of them thus far in the edition so far. So we
Right.
feel this is a small improvement that should make a big, hopefully a meaningful difference to players in wanting to field them.
And remember, the vast majority of this is changes to units that were the worst units in their book. These were units that were never showing up at our tournaments. They're units that just, and the reason for it is because they just didn't function. Like they were just missing something that put them over the bar of saying, I'm going to bring this, or no, I'm really hamstringing myself so much just because I want to bring my models that I like.
Yep. All right. Dark Elves.
So I thought we had the Manticore Toughness before. That's not new, is
Oh,
it?
we did. We probably just got to color that. We'll do it live. Keep going.
I'm doing it live. There we go. That was there before. But
Ta-da!
we have two new ones. So as far as casting value goes, I stuck with the idea that pretty much only like one spell out of any given faction should be lowered because in essence, when the army specific FAQ came out, there was still only roughly like a third of this faction spells. Now I think
Yep.
Wood Elves had like 4 of their spells lower in casting value, and other ones didn't. But just roughly speaking, it's about 1. Cursing Word is a really like not very good of a spell. It used to lower your weapon skill and blood skill to 1. So if you were a weapon skill 7 or a weapon skill 10 bloodthirster, you could become weapon skill 1. And Games Workshop said, "Oh, a legacy army was something that's good. You're not allowed to have that." Oh no, no. So they spent 2 seconds thinking about it and they changed it to -1 instead of lowering to 1. So now you can lower someone's weapon skill by 1 point, which is great.
Well, yeah, I don't know that I mean, I'm sure they spent a little more time on it. But that being said, lowering to 1 in this edition, a flat 1, would be
It was
incredibly powerful. That would be one of the most, if not the most powerful spells in the game. So that being said, is -1 perhaps it could have been a little more spicy than that? Maybe a -2. Maybe that's a good
or at the
discussion
very least,
debate
could
for
it
another
just do
day.
weapon skill and blood skill? Could it just do both instead of just only
There,
one of
there are
those
definitely
things?
multiple ways it could have been approached, but we're not
Mm,
looking to change the rules or how they fundamentally core work. We're just looking to update,
yeah.
again, the casting value to reflect the latest
At,
FAQ
yes, at
updates.
the moment that feels like what makes sense because again, this would have been a 9+ to cast, which is even if you're a level 4 wizard, that's only like a 56% chance to even go off on a spell that does
Yep.
nothing. So again, just lowering that to 8+. Guess what? Probably still no one's gonna cast this on you. So whatever.
But we do have one new tweak that we are
Yes.
introducing to the Dark Elf community. What is that, Evan?
So this is something that I've been noticing as a big sore thumb when it comes to me, as because again, I do have some biases. I only play 9 of the old world factions, okay, but 3 of them are the elf ones, and wood elves and high elves. Every single infantry unit they have is a unit size 5+. None of them
Hmm.
require you to bring 10 models for the archers, for the spearmen. You can bring 5 spearmen, just have them hang out. Be like, hey, we can't even rank up, but we're going to be here. And so the
Yep.
reason for that is because their cheapest infantry model is 9 points. Like they're expensive. Remember, goblins are 3 points. So minimum unit size on elf units is very important. And all of the dark elf units are 10+. All of them. Even Blackguard of Nagaron, who are like 16 points per model, are a 10+ size unit. I don't understand it. So personally, I think this is a great quality of life change. In particular, we're running an escalation league where we're going to run 500-point games. And if you didn't have unit size 5+ on these units, if you had to bring 10 Blackguard, you couldn't even bring 10 because that would be over the maximum unit allotment of 25%. So this is just a very small quality of life change that I think maybe other people have overlooked. City Guard, so they can be your crossbowmen. You could bring little 5-man squads of crossbowmen if you want. Executioners can buy drilled, so you could bring little squads of executioners in drilled formations if you potentially want to do that. Corsairs can have hand bows, so you can kind of use them like little skirmish units, even though they don't skirmish, but they can move around in open order with their hand bows or with additional hand weapons, and I think that's pretty cool too. And so I think just making their unit size 5+ just feels very adequate to match the other elf orientations.
Yep. So it's not about increasing the lethality or output or damage at all. Really, it's we feel that this is again likely an oversight. They likely went and updated the other elf factions in later iterations of the books, and didn't come back and update the Dark Elf book at that point when they
Right.
did decide. You know what? For elves, it feels really good to have 5+ as the min unit size. So we feel this is an opportunity that at this point we'd like to the community to have that as an option when
Right. And
crafting your list.
remember, more than ever before, you actually kind of want infantry in like two ranks because you can actually like fight in both
Mhm.
ranks. So I feel like I don't know how much this will ever be used, but I really love the idea of just bringing 5-man crossbowman units to fill some parts of my core out
I think it
because
will be for
be
the. I
nice.
think it will be for ranged units for
Yeah,
sure.
in particular
Probably
ranged
less for
units. Yeah.
the melee units. All right, ogres. So now on to a list that is primarily dominated by monstrous infantry. But again, we're looking for what are the fewest changes we need to make in order for this to feel better. And ogre players showing up to the events are going to have a good time, right? That's really
Right.
our focus. But we start with, as always, with our what do we need to change, Evan, on the casting side to bring this in line with the 1.5 update.
Okay, so first of all, we changed Troll Guts. Troll Guts was an 8 plus and an 11 plus for the lower and the higher values. Now, Troll Guts is maybe a little bit different than some of the other spells in that it doesn't really do that much unless you hit the higher value because it increases your toughness by 2, but only for the current turn. So you kind of have to cast on somebody who isn't in combat and then charge them into combat immediately after that. And if you got your Ogre Bulls up to toughness 6, the other person might just flee from that charge, so you might not even get to use it whatsoever. But Troll Guts is an interesting spell, and I think that it's perfectly valid to lower its casting value. I'm not biased at all. I've never cast
Right,
this
so
spell
that's
before.
our on the casting side. Now on to now we're going to get into some newer things in particular. Two of them are definitely buffs. One of them is what we believe is addressing an oversight on one of the rules that could be viewed as a nerf, but we believe this is an important fix. But let's start with the buffs. Iron Fist, Perry, talk to us about that, Evan.
Okay, so it feels like Ogre's kind of most unique thing about them is that they have Iron Fists, which are kind of a shield that is also an additional hand weapon at the same time. And all the while, like infantry has been changed so that regular infantry can parry with a shield and improve their armor save. And it's making light armor and shield infantry go from 0 to hero. That one pip of armor is like, wow, I can actually survive chariot impact hits now on like a 6
It's a big
plus.
difference.
This is
It's a big
amazing.
difference.
Yeah, so it's a big difference. And I think that this is a really cool tactical choice for you. And here's what it is: infantry unit that's using its hand weapon and iron fist. So that means that it has to basically be like an ogre bull or a character who's using a hand weapon. It can't be, using a magic weapon with their iron fist. Can choose to either get their armor save up by 2, so basically the exact same way that you would parry, right? To maximum 3 plus. Or you can get the extra attack. So you can either have Ogre Bulls with 4 attacks and a 5 plus armor save if they have an Iron Fist, or they can go defensive and have their 3 attacks, so no improvement there, and they'll go to a 4 plus armor save. In a very similar way to like let's just say like an Orc that has additional hand weapon and a shield. They could pick which one to use.
Yep. Yep. And similar to, again, right, with the new FAQ update, they could make a choice at the beginning of each combat phase. So
Yeah,
it's not only allowing, again, the theme of giving the monstrous infantry, in particular the ogre monstrous infantry, something that they already have that's unique to them, that's iconic to them, that's very flavorful for the army, making that more on par. Again, we're not looking for more damage output with them, just more on par with the defensive profile, which will make them feel better, but also an interesting choice, right? So it's not just a flat, as you're actually making that choice at the beginning of each round to combat. And I've said in many other videos, interesting choices is one of the things that makes Old World so special. So really excited about this change.
yeah, and now that you can pick how to fight every time, now you're going to use your Iron Fist either way, right? But let's just say on the
Mhm.
charge, when you're charging somebody, you're going to use the Iron Fist to give you more attacks. But then you have your Ogre Bulls out there, and it's, oh no, a Lance of Bretonnian Knights is charging you in the face. And normally those Lances are AP2, and they're just like, well, I'm so glad I have this armor save I don't get to roll ever. You could just go defensive mode and get at least the 6 plus, which makes you feel a lot better about having the unit on the table and not just being like, well, they're all dead. So, yeah.
All right. We also have one second new thing in particular for ogres we wanted to address. So let's talk about the bulls.
So ogre charges are very, very important. If you look at every other army that's very similar to ogres, so orcs and goblins, beastmen,
Mhm.
skaven, they pretty much just have warband on all of their like core rank and file infantry units. And one of the reasons they have this is so that they can kind of take that lower leadership that they have and kind of raise it up. But it also has a secondary effect of letting them all re-roll their charges. And so you get, when I'm playing Beastman, I'm like, oh hell yeah, I got warband. I'm re-rolling all my charges. And every time I'm not playing one of those armies, I'm just like, do I want to pay the 30 points for that banner that lets me re-roll charges? But anyway, I think that if Ogre Bulls had Warband, they would be much more interesting as a choice. You combine that with the Iron Fist Parry idea, and now you have a unit that most people are like, oh my god, these Bulls, they're dragging me down, they suck, they're horrible, what do I want them for? They don't do anything, right? Well, now you've got this option of, okay, they've got Warband, so if you do take like at least one rank, and they're by themselves, their leadership 8. Wow, impressive.
Mhm.
But the main thing is they can reroll their charge roll, and they can actually potentially get there and get their impact hits, which
Yep.
cool. I think that's fine.
Yep.
Make your impact hits sometimes. And remember, you got Earth and Ramparts and all these different ways to entrench yourself that protect from impact hits. And you can always just walk up next to the Bulls and not let them have a 3-inch charge. They can also just lose their impact hits that way. So there are ways to play
Yep.
against it, but I think that just having Warband just feels like what they probably would have done if they had done more iterations on editing the book.
Yep, and that's kind of our view of that as well. So one of them is again trying to address some of the ogres are definitely on the spectrum of the legacy factions of the lower side of the floor, and we're just trying to find a small way to raise that floor up a little bit, so it is more enjoyable to bring your ogre army to the table. That being
Yeah.
said, we did just talk about two meaningful ways to improve ogres. There is one thing we did need to address that we felt is ogre players were not necessarily abusing it. We believe this is a GW. Again, they stopped iterating on the army. They started focusing on other armies, and we believe this is an oversight that often leads to fairly feel bad moments that should be addressed.
Absolutely. So numbing chill is a rule that's on 2 units. There's the Thunder Tusk, which can be mounted, or it's Thunder Tusk Riders. It's a unit by itself. And then there's
Mhm.
also the Yetis. And what numbing chill does, what it does in the core rulebook or in the Ogre Army rulebook, is that any model who's in base contact with a model with this rule gets -1 weapon skill and initiative. The problem is if you have a unit of 3 Yetis and they charge into somebody, then they're in base contact with 3 of them, so they suffer -3 weapon skill. I don't believe that was ever intended to happen. It's very, very silly. I did have one very funny situation where I actually had an Ogre Tyrant on a Thunder Tusk charge into 3 Yetis, and I had to go after them because they lowered my weapon skill by -3, and I was like, because my opponent was arguing that it does stack, and I was like, okay, man, sure, And I don't think it just makes feel bads, and it's all about whether your opponent is going to just argue that it does work or it doesn't work. It creates this massive confusion with your TO, and guess what? This whole minus weapon skill initiative, it's bad enough if you can stack it on like a character on a mount, right? What if you charge into a bunch of infantry models and you have a unit of like 4 Yetis wide and they all lower some of the models that they're in base contact with by -1, 2, or 3 weapon skill, but some of them not. And then you have the second rank of guys behind them that have different initiative values than all the other people. It just creates this massive cluster. You know what I'm going to say.
And again, people were. It's not that people were
Ugh.
playing it wrong. Raw. If you read the rules
Yeah,
raw,
that's how it
I
works.
totally understand. That's how you would interpret the rules. But we do not believe that is the intent, or that it is an oversight that would have been addressed through iteration. And so we are definitely going to be addressing that for our events going forward. Because at the moment, it just creates feel bad moments. Versus, we want everybody to be having fun, not just the ogre player, but also the person playing against the ogres. All right, is that it for ogres, Evan? Should we move on to the next
Yeah,
one?
and I did also change it so it's not models in base contact, it is units in base contact with one or more. So if you charge into a bunch of infantry, then the whole unit, when they swing back at you, it has the weapon skill initiative being lowered. You don't have to and again, you don't want the other player to have to separate out their weapons, their different models by different weapon skills and having like all these different roles.
Yep,
It'd be really
it gets weird.
common to charge into weapon skill 4 infantry where half of them are hitting on 3s and the other half aren't. It's like
Yep, slows the game down. It's not good.
massively, massively.
All right, Chaos Dwarves.
So, Chaos Dwarves, I think, have been a pretty good army. They've been doing pretty well at events when people have been playing them, and I've
Yep.
played against them once. I
Mhm.
don't feel like they're in the same place as many of the other legacy factions. In particular, the core errata changes that the Games Workshop did have massively improved the quality value of regular rank and file Ironsworn and Infernal Guard
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
basically they now can use the parry rule. They can use their great weapons on when they want to charge somebody, or they could use their hand weapons when they're getting charged, stuff like that. So they can just benefit from all those core rules. So what are we going to change, right? So first of all, we have a casting value of one of their spells. Flames of Hashut is an assailant spell that probably no one's ever heard of, but it did have a casting value of 9+, which is probably way too high. And this one is similar in casting value and in effect to like I think Hand of Cain, which was the high elf assailant spell that was a 9+. That was like, really? So they just following that pattern, we lowered it to 8+, and I feel like that's perfectly fine. Not that big of a deal.
All right, but we have something new again, following our theme of monstrous infantry. What can we do for you?
Our bull centers, they're monstrous cavalry, right? But I mean, they feel like monstrous
Close
infantry
enough.
because they've got 3 wounds. They're not super fast, and bull center renders barely ever see. You know what? No, they never see play. No one's ever brought them to anywhere within 1,000 miles of me. And I think they should because they're horrifyingly ugly, and I want to look at that. That's what I want. So we think that if you look at a bull centaur render, it's pretty similar to like a dragon ogre, except it has 3 wounds instead of 4 and toughness 5 instead of 4.
Yep.
But even if you give it the light armor and armor hide 1 and a shield, so it's just using hand weapon and shield, these guys are a 4+ armor save when a dragon ogre is laughing at them, being like, "Ha! I get to use my great weapon and I still have a better armor than you," right? So a little bit silly, I think. So we were just thinking we're going to change their armor to heavy armor to put them a little bit more on par with other monstrous cavalry that have that same kind of price point. We know that Dragon Ogres are some of the best units in the game. This does not put them on the same level as Dragon Ogres whatsoever.
And
okay?
we're not trying to.
No way,
Again,
and
to
we're
be
not
clear,
trying to.
the goal. We're not trying to. We're just trying to. Okay, this army definitely is already performing very well, but we never see this unit on the table.
Wouldn't
What's
it
a
be cool
small
if they
tweak that we
did
could
show up?
address?
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully this will be enough. We do believe this is hopefully meaningful enough that people will be incentivized to field them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I certainly would. Seeing this way, I mean, especially, I think that one of the things we've learned over the past week and a half is that, hey, if you make an armor save 1 better, oftentimes units can go from, I'll never use this in a million years, to, oh, yeah, let's see what happens.
This has play now. Yep, absolutely. Okay, cool. So Chaos Demons, there's a couple more things here, and let's start with the one at the top. So to talk about this is an update and from our previous version of our FAQ. Our previous version of our FAQ was that the warp spawn rule, again, one of the biggest problems with demons and the way they're written in the legacy faction, because again, we believe they need further iteration. It was kind of a holdover, honestly, from previous editions where, hey, if someone has magical attacks, it will just slice through the demon's armor save or ethereal creatures, and right, they'll just get destroyed. And that was fine in previous editions when there weren't that many magical weapons. But in this edition,
Right.
every army has many magical weapons, and almost all of the elite infantry
Yeah, the
or
source of
elite
weapon in
cavalry
particular kind of makes
have
this
magic weapon. Right, it's everywhere. Whether it's all armies have magic weapons. So it's a huge problem that effectively the demons almost never get their save. So we
Yeah.
first started with our first version of our errata legacy errata was that okay, magical weapons will not remove the ward save, and that's been very effective. And we've seen more players fielding demons at our events, which is exciting. They're still definitely on the lower performing side of things. So one additional tweak we're making here is not only do magical weapons not remove the ward save, magical weapons will also not remove the regen save for a demon unit that has a regen save.
Which almost
so
none
that's
of
a
them
pretty
do.
big difference. Right, very few of them do, but it definitely feels a lot better, and you'll see below what we're trying to also address and trying to improve. One in particular, factions of the demons that seem to be performing the weakest.
Yeah, so just to talk about, right, a Nurgle demon has, or let's just say Plague Bearer, right? He's toughness 4. He's got a 5-up ward, no armor. Remember, no armor save at all, and a 6-up regen. Now, in the core rules, if someone just hits them with any kind of magical attack, like a fireball, right, they would lose their ward save and they would lose their regen save. They lose both of them. So they would just be like a toughness 4 naked guy. Remember, a Plague Bearer is like 14 points for a toughness 4 naked guy. So it just doesn't feel good at all. Not for you, the person who's trying to bring this army. That, by the way, Nurgle's supposed to be durable. I don't know if you know this. They're supposed to like survive things and like sit there going, haha, you tried to hurt me. Didn't really work. But no, they were just getting absolutely massacred. So we changed the ward saves. Cool. But the regen saves were still being taken away, which, by the way, plenty of people just forget that the warp spawn rule exists. Okay? They will just be like, I'm going to roll my regen saves now. And the other guy goes, yeah. Sure, and they're playing it wrong, but they don't know they're playing it wrong because it doesn't feel wrong. Because I've got like eight guys in this unit, and they cost 14 points each. So surely I can roll my 6-up regen save, right? So again,
Yep.
we're gonna get to that. But the first couple things we have to talk about is the spells. Demons, right? Most demon players kind of have more of like a mono god list where they only play one. So this is almost 4 factions in one. And so again, if I'm following my pattern of trying to have one spell change the casting values by a little bit per each faction, I kind of have to do it to 3 or 4 of them, because if you play Slanesh or if you play Zinch and I lower the spell for Nurgle or something, then it didn't help you, right? Because you're not going to play that spell anyway.
Yep. So there's a few tweaks there. So I don't know that we need to go through all of them, but
Yeah.
effectively you could see different gods, different signature spells, getting
Right.
that reduction by 1 for 1 point.
And remember, the casting values of these spells were pretty high. So we had 10 plus on Cacophonic Hymn and 10 plus on. Oh, Mike, I think we've got the same name twice. So I think those are supposed to be 2 different spells. But anyway, we'll fix that later.
We'll fix it.
Yeah. But Gift of Mutation, for example, I only lowered the higher one, not both. So I think that's another example of kind of making it an 8 plus, 11 plus instead of 8 plus, 12 plus. And then finally, we have one more change here. So I've played a lot of games against my friends, a pure Nurgle Demons list. It does no damage, it does not survive anything, and it just keels over. And I don't think people see this at events ever, and I don't even know if they've played it, because Nurgle just doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to just sit there and like not die, which would be kind of interesting if you have like an objective or something to capture, but they don't do that. They have no durability whatsoever. So it sucks. And I thought that the solution to this should be that the kind of regular rank and file Nurgle demons could just have their regen saves improved by 1. So a Plague Bearer can have a 5-up, 5-up. Again, remember, no armor save. He's still weapon skill 3. They still just get killed constantly, and they're still 14 something points each. So this is not breaking the universe. No one plays this army except one of my friends.
All right. Well, hopefully more people will play it because it's awesome and really cool to see on the tabletop.
I
All right.
loved
So
it.
that was
Yeah.
it's so cool and it's painted beautifully when you see it paint. It's
Andre's
amazing.
army
All right.
is very beautiful.
We have one more though.
We have the Vampire Counts.
Yes, the best army.
And
best
this,
army.
Mike, is perhaps one area where we can potentially agree, because I've got a Vampire Counts army, you have a Vampire Counts army. We like the Vampire
Doesn't
Counts.
everybody?
Yes, everyone
Yeah.
has
So
one.
they're amazing. So again, the Vampire Counts, again, they are out of all the legacy factions, one of the one that performs the best in the event. So again, we really don't want to tinker with this list very much at all because it already is performing very well. So again, just talking about our new things. Again, the one thing was just reducing the high-end casting value, as Evan alluded to before, on the Van Hales down by 1. So you'll actually see it. It's still going to be actually hard, just as it was before. It's hard to get that second casting value. So pretty straightforward there. This seems appropriate with the reduction in the casting cost. Again, keep in mind, we also already have in our core FAQ that the Mortis engine does not stack in terms of its plus to cast, so that's not new. But we have one new one. In fact, we were really motivated by this the other day, and something that I thought about before in looking at the book of going back and forth. Am I focusing on the kind of the Blood Knight vampires, or am I focusing on the Strigoi vampires? And there's pros and cons, and there's something that's been holding Strigoi back for quite some time. And also, it was really exciting the other day. We saw at one of our events a Strigoi themed army, and it was awesome. But they need a little bit of help, don't they, Evan?
So the Strigoi Ghoul King has the 0-1 per 1,000 points limitation that a Vampire Lord or the Master Necromancer has. However, the Strigoi Ghoul King has the 75-point magic item limit of like a halfway hero, the kind of person we see as like a Creation Chieftain, or like a in Dark Elves the Death Hag has that. And the problem with the Strigoi Ghoul King is not only does he have less magic item limit, but he also has no weapon or armor at all. So he is a hand weapon naked guy at base. So even if you buy him the Terrorgeist mount, he's still just a hand weapon guy unless you buy a weapon. And if you buy a halfway decent weapon, he has no ward save, no defense whatsoever. And that's just awful, especially if you make him your general because you want to have kind of a Strigoi themed army. Now he's just terrible. Like, wow.
Yeah.
I think
that's part of the problem. Like,
he doesn't feel right at all.
And the vampire mutations or powers you can take really don't help with that. And exactly, they have the 5-up regen, but so do all the other undead characters have the 5-up regen. So, and they still crumble. If he's on a Terrorgeist anyway, that has the 5-up regen anyway. So again, he just doesn't have that additional layer of armor or defense because he can't take the same equipment that a vampire count comes
Right.
with, right? He doesn't get heavy armor out of the gate. He can't take a lance. He can't take a great weapon or any of those things. So restricting him to the 75 points, in particular if he's your general, we think feels kind of
Remember,
rough, and we'd like to
in an
see.
undead
Yeah.
army, if he's your general, that means not only does he have to pay points to also be a wizard, but he also, if he dies, all of your whole army starts just crumbling to dust. So if you have a
You're in
very
big trouble if that
vulnerable
happens. Yeah.
struggle, guy, then most of it just starts dying off on you. And so I've seen a lot of playtest games where people are like, yeah, Strigoi Ghoul King with the Ogre Blade, I'll just charge in there and wall up stuff. They bounce off, they don't do that much damage, they just crumble to death from
Yep.
combat resolution, and then your whole army just turns to dust, and you're like, this does not,
Yep.
this just feels horribly wrong. Just, ugh.
So just
Ah.
increasing his if he's a general, the magic item allowance from
Yeah,
75
I'm
to
sorry. I don't know if we
100
said it out
will
loud, but yes, we're gonna
will
increase
allow. He has to
the.
be the general,
Yeah,
but it increases from 75 to 100. And just by that one tweak, we believe you should be able to afford a good magical weapon and a ward save or of some kind in order to give you some sort of defense. And we think this is going to feel a lot more fun to put them on the tabletop, and hopefully we'll see more of them on the battlefield, which we haven't been seeing a lot of.
right. And I think the reason why he's kind of crappy in the main book is because he does have one ability where he can, on like a 6 to wound, he can heal a single wound, but he only gets to do that. Not for any of the wounds he does. It's like if he just does at least one wound, you roll a single dice, and if it's a 6, he heals a wound. So basically, on average, it never happens.
Yeah. And he just doesn't have enough attacks for this to happen. But again, you have to anyway. We've talked about it a bit,
Yeah.
so we think this is a good tweak that should help players that want to field that. Okay, so we got to the end of our Legacy Errata 2.0. Again, you saw both some casting tweaks following the pattern that we saw the GW team employ. We also looked at some Monstrous Infantry or Monstrous Cavalry, looking to give them a little bit of love in particular, since we saw the infantry updates. We wanted to also match the vortexes so that they work like the rest of the things. And this also gave us an opportunity to go back and reevaluate and get community feedback from our community of there are some additional tweaks to some of those units that weren't quite performing that we felt were opportunities to add here as well. And yeah, really excited to see these on the battlefield real soon.
Yeah, I'm excited to
Evan,
play it.
any more thoughts?
Oh, so first of all, we're gonna post the link to this spreadsheet so you can look at it, you can download it if you want to play it, or you want to say, hey, you want to try this out, see what happens. Great. Second of all, if you have feedback for us, if you want to play test this and say, I don't think this works, or you missed something, that's great. First of all, you could join our Discord. You can talk to us there. I'm in there an embarrassing amount of time during the day when I should be working. I'm in there talking to people.
Don't tell anybody.
No, yeah, don't tell anyone that. Or hey, guess what? If you don't want to go to another app, you could just leave us a YouTube comment. That's great. So hopefully people are appreciative. And remember, we're just trying to make sure that these armies don't get left behind, they don't get abandoned, and no one is going to be there, because you know what? These armies are going to come back as a core supportive faction eventually. But it'd be great if people who are in love with these factions, want to collect these models, can get some support in the meantime. Because guess what? Buying, collecting, building, and painting a Warhammer army, for most people, not me, but for most people, it takes years to do. Okay? So people might want to buy into it now and still collect in several years when, vampire counts are officially being released. They're going to be over the moon, but you know what? It'd be great if they already got started. They already had the models ready. It'd be cool.
Absolutely. And again, remember, our focus at Ogre Legends is to grow the community, and that's what we're focused on here, allowing people to play with the things they want to play with. All right, let's wrap it up there. Evan, any closing words, sir?
Stay legacy legendary. Like, I was gonna say legendary, but that doesn't make any sense.
That did it. That was beautiful, though. All right, we'll see y'all next time.